Hello, this is Mark from My Keys to Music. Thanks for joining me on this video. Today we're talking about beefing up the B3. The B3 is an organ from Hammond. It's emulated wonderfully on the Nord Electro 6 and the Nord Stage 3 keyboards, and it works really well overall. If you find yourself playing the bass part, for instance, let's say you're in a band and you're playing keyboard bass, and it's time for you to put on the organ part or play the organ sounds, the B3 by itself, in my opinion, does not have a strong enough bass emphasis to where you can really hear it and hold down the low end. Now, you can adjust the EQ, yes. You also have a nifty option on the Electro 6, which is called B3 Bass, which actually its sole purpose is to do that, is to emphasize the bass part. So you can put it into that mode and you'll add a lot of emphasis there. But there's something that I think is even more effective than any of those options, something that really brings it over the top. This is particularly good in the worship setting or in a church, things like that, where you're playing the B3, maybe accompanying a sermon, and you want that low pedal tone, that subwoofer type sound to be emphasized with the B3. This technique, I think, will come in very handy. I think you'll find that it works really well. And this question actually came up from a student in the course Master the Nord Stage 3, or it may have come up from the course Master the Nord Electro 6. I don't remember now. I think it was the Electro 6 course, actually. And this person really was that. This was a professional church organist, if you will, and she wanted to emphasize the bass part because the B3 by itself really didn't cut it for her. So the technique I showed her now appears to be working really, really well. So I wanted to share that with you, and so that you could take advantage of that when the time comes. Personally, I also play in a band, and I play keyboard parts a lot, or key bass parts a lot, I should say. A lot of times there's not a bass player when we play, so I find myself wanting more and more bass. Now, you might say, well, why not just mix in a traditional bass like you would if you were playing keyboard bass? Why fret over this? Well, there are many situations where you want the B3 to sound like a B3 or a pipe organ to sound like a pipe organ, but you don't want to hear a bass guitar mixed in with that. You just want sort of a subwoofer type sound against those organs. This is the technique that will come in handy for that. All right, so we'll start with the Stage 3 and we'll look at how to set that up. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. And then we'll go into the Electro 6 and set it up there. As always, please feel free to subscribe if you like this content. If you have a Nord keyboard, you'll especially like this channel in its current state. We're talking a lot about Nord keyboards. And feel free to like this video and share it with your buddies and pals out there in the Nord universe. Any sharing that you do will always be appreciated. And I just want to say thanks. Welcome to 2020. Here we go. All right, here we are on the Nord Stage 3. I'm going to set it to a standard program here, Royal Grand 3D. That happens to be A11. I want to start from something just out of the blue so that you can see how this is set up. So what I want to do, obviously, is put on the organ. So let's turn on the organ engine, turn off the piano engine. Let's set the drawbars so that they're just, let's say, the first four are pulled out just like this. And I'll put on the rotary speaker, and we'll have it presenting a slow situation. Should sound just like that. And then let's just listen to that with the traditional organ and the bass, and I'll just sort of play a... Okay, so the bass doesn't come out and jump out at you, especially if you're playing live. If you've ever played this B3 organ live in a band, which I do a lot, that organ bass will not cut through. Unless you have a bass player obviously playing it, then you don't need it to cut through. But if you are trying to hold down the bass part, you're going to need to be sensitive to that. Now, what happens a lot is that sometimes you want to hear a distinct bass guitar playing along, and that's perfectly fine, and that's essentially what I've been doing for years. But it dawned on me the other day that what if you just wanted to keep that traditional organ sound happening for the performance, but you just want to emphasize it and that subwoofer effect. So a secret here is to turn on the synth engine, split the keyboard, and add a sine wave. All right, let's do that. So first, let's split the keyboard. I'll just present here one split right down the middle, but I do actually want to change the the note that it splits on, I'm going to choose F3 because I don't really want the split to be right in the middle of the keyboard. I want it to be closer to the left, just where the left hand plays. Then I'll turn on the synth engine, and then I'll hold the shift button and look for the sound initialization button. On my version, it's right over here. Okay, on your version of the Nord Stage 3, you might find it somewhere else. All right, and then I'll push OK, so that clears that. Then you want to set it for a sine wave, and you want the sine wave to play only on the left side of the keyboard. So adjust your zone settings so that it goes on the left side, just like that. Okay, so let's play that organ again without any enhancement. All right, now let's turn on the synth engine, bring it up to almost full volume. It should be a sine wave, and here we go. So a big difference. I don't know if you can hear that in your headphones or wherever you're listening to this, on your phone or what have you. You probably won't hear it if you're just listening to this on your smartphone. You're not going to necessarily hear a difference in the bass sound. You're going to have to put on some headphones or pop it through something that can represent that. So that's my little secret there for emphasizing the bass. Now, it's not just for rock bands or in a band setting. It would work perfectly for a church organist using a B3 and accompanying, let's say, a sermon or something like that, where you want to have those pedal tones. Obviously, I don't have pedals here, but if I did have pedals, this sine wave sort of mimics what you can do with a pedal tone. Listen to the sine wave by itself. It's just a low, subdued, very much like a subwoofer sound. It goes perfectly with the organ. I don't know if you necessarily play like that at a sermon, but that gives you the idea. All right, let's do this on the Nord Electro 6 and see what happens. Now, on the Nord Electro 6, you don't exactly have the option of doing a sine wave, so we've got to come up with the next best thing. But the next best thing isn't really that bad. It's actually quite good. So let me show you what we'll do here. We'll sort of repeat the process. I'll just go to my first sound here. Well, I'll go to my second sound because I've been playing with my first sound. I'll go to Nefertiti, MK. We'll turn on the organ. We'll turn off the piano. We'll set the drawbars in the same way that we did for the stage 3, which is the first 3 out, or the first 4 out, rather. We'll put on the B3 option, and everything else will be standard. Let's just play that. All right, and that's the organ. So, but the Nord Electro 6 has the other option of B3 bass. Let's listen to the difference there. Not bad. Really makes a big difference on that bass option that you have. This is without the bass option. Just the B3 by itself. And then with the B3 bass. Now, for most of you, that might be good enough. Now, on the Nord Electro 5, you also have a B3 plus bass option. It's called B3 plus bass on the Nord Electro 5. And I used to use that, but it still wasn't quite good enough for the band. It wasn't quite able to cut through. So, in the same way that we added a sine wave to the Nord Stage 3, let's see what we can do with the synth engine here on the Nord Electro 6. And let's do the same thing. First, we'll split the keyboard. I'll push and hold this split button and set the split setting to, let's say, C4 in this case. All right. And then we'll turn on the synth engine. Now, obviously, I don't have a sine wave, but there's something that comes in really handy that I've been playing with, and it's also something I used to use back in the day. It's called the SH101, and it's a Roland keyboard. And here it is. It's 253 on my keyboard, but it's most likely going to be another number on your keyboard. I've been monkeying around with the sounds here. So SH101 bass 1. There's also an SH101 bass 2, I believe. Let's just listen to the synth engine by itself and also make sure that it only presents itself on the left side of the split. So that's this button here. All right, this is what that sounds like. Okay, bring it down an octave. Now, it's still synthy, but not quite as synthy as other bass synths. And combined with the organ, and bring it down just a little bit, let's put on the rotary speaker. I just like the way that bass sounds. It doesn't really sound synthy at all, so long as the organ's playing along with it. It's going to give you that nice rounded sound. Now on the Stage 3, you can also play with the SH-101, but it's not loaded by default. You'll have to load it from the Sound Manager and from the Nord website in order to get that SH-101. It does come by default on the Electro 6. Let's put that rotary speaker on and pull out the drawbars. Upon listening a little closer to the SH-101, it is a little bit on the synth side of things. Maybe I had it a little too high in the mix, so you'd want to bring that down a little bit in the mix. But I tell you, it will make a big difference on stage and perhaps in the worship location where you are trying to build those pedal tones in a sense and give it some more oomph so that you can have a stronger, bolder performance by enhancing your B3 with some broad bass tones and frequencies. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.